I want to bring on Suzanne Mooner. Suzanne's from Social Housing Action Campaign. That's a lovely intro, Suzanne. How much of Lou did you hear there?
Yeah, I could hear all of it, actually.
It's horrible.
And it just absolutely
Horrible.
resonates
Horrible.
so much with what we hear day in, day out. Absolutely.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I mean, when I heard about the Grenfell, and I am making the links. I am, because I've been down there. My show has been down there. We've invested a lot. And when you speak to people, they say, well, look, we've been talking about, to the HMO, which we've been talking about, bad stairways, bad ventilation, possibility of a fire. And then when you hear some of the stories we've heard in other parts of South London today, we've called to get X-fix. It's almost as though if you live, I'm going to try this with you. I'm going to press your button. I'm going to trigger you now. If you live in one of those properties, you should be grateful you got somewhere to live. You're a second-class citizen. Just sit down and shut up, and we'll fix it when we can.
Yeah. I have to make a distinction here, because I would say that is absolutely the attitude of the executives of the majority of very large housing associations. It is not our experience of the staff themselves. I mean, obviously there are individual staff with individual attitudes, but a lot of people, the staff, when you get a housing association that bullies and mistreats its tenants, go and talk to the workers. The workers are also bullied and mistreated. So,
but hold on, just go slowly for me, Suzanne, right? So, because I'm getting fired up here, because throughout my life, when you live away and you have an understanding of something, when that's challenged, it sometimes takes you a minute. My whole understanding of housing associations, my entire life, has been about them being kind, compassionate, generous organizations, not for profit, who will work in the best interests of all the people who are within their properties. That's how I have understood it. You're challenging that, and it has been challenged many times on the show today.
Yeah, you're a few decades out of date there.
Well,
Eddie,
you sound like my wife now.
But yes, I mean that really is not the sector has become highly commercialized, and what you have to remember, I think, what explains this is the fact that it is a sector that is unaccountable. It is not accountable to anyone. These are huge organizations with vast wealth. They have excellent solicitors, and they are able to get away with more or less whatever they want to do. There is a regulatory framework that they have to operate to, and they're also quite often registered charities. But the regulatory framework has been cut down by successive governments over the last few years to have a much narrower focus than it did. 30,
but it still must
ago.
have a duty of care, Suzanne.
They might have a duty of care, but how do you exercise that if you are a tenant? There's a big problem with access to justice, isn't there? Because you either have to, and you're starting out as a tenant, you are starting out an individual against an organisation. You are automatically at a disadvantage. And Louisa's comments about trying to make a complaint, it's what we call the hamster wheel, because you phone up, they take your complaint. They tell you someone will get back to you. No one gets back to you. You phone up again. We've got no record of your complaint. And that just goes on and on. It's a war of attrition against the tenants. And like I say, there is no kind of wider body that is really looking after the interests of tenants. I mean, the government is now talking about it post Grenfell. But it's at very early stages. We don't have anything that really is going to give any kind of power to the tenants. And what housing associations have been doing is undermining and getting rid of tenant and resident associations, which was traditionally the voice of tenants. I mean, they had some problems themselves. Individually they might have problems. But on the whole, they were a much more democratic system of being able to engage with the housing association. And the other way that people engage with their landlord was
But it's like a union, though. It's like a union. It's been challenged in the same way that a union has. A group of people coming together with a common interest to work for the betterment of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was traditionally based on an estate. So you'd have every estate would have its own tenant and resident association. They would maybe get a room to meet in,
Yes.
and the organisation, the landlord, would send one of their staff along to kind of liaise with them through that. So it was a channel of communication that,
Yes.
operated very similar to a union. But the other thing that the associations have now almost completely got rid of, there's very few that we know of the larger associations that continue to have neighbourhood managers. So you've completely lost that continuity. Now, instead of going to your neighbourhood manager who comes around to your estate once a week, or, you know their number, you know their name, they know you, they know about your family, you now just phone a helpline, and it could go to anyone on that helpline. So
and it puts a distance between those who are and those that do. I just want to play some audio to you because it is the big story that we're focused on today. Earlier I spoke to Ben, Susanna, and Ben's a tenant on this estate in Tulsa where the local authority are effectively taking these three housing associations to cure. Here he tells me a little bit about his experience with damp.
Our property extends to, the edge of the flat. The external walls, if there's a damp problem there, even if we wanted to, there's nothing we can do there. It's the freeholder, in this case, the housing association via the council, whose responsibility it is to make sure that water is not coming into our buildings.
And on your first point, which is about communication, I want to ask you about what Louise did. But first, take a listen to Tricia.
You phone up, get like a call centre for repairs. You have to wait donkeys for them to finally answer the phone. And when they do answer the phone, you usually get, well, you can get your insurance to fix that. No, I don't think so. It's from the people above. So I can't get my insurance to fix the leak that's coming from above into my house. And the new thing is we'll be out in whatever time. Someone comes out, they'll have a look, and that's it.
So we don't want to do a moan-in, Suzanne, because clearly, you and I could do this, but we probably, we probably need to change tack in terms of there will be people listening to this who will be triggered by what we're talking about in terms of their own story. So we probably better address it in a way that perhaps helps them. So what Louise said about documenting everything, having it via email, so there was a record of it, is that something that you would advocate?
Yeah, definitely. And what we would say to people is if it's affecting more than one person on the estate, to really try and get everyone working together on that problem and getting it raised. And making as much of a public fuss as they can. Go to your local paper, talk on,
your local radio station.
Yeah, your local radio station. Because really naming and shaming really seems to be just about the only thing that has an impact. And even that is a bit of a struggle. I mean, you're doing a brilliant job even by getting airing of this problem, because it's just not being spoken about. It's just not being highlighted anywhere. Because a lot of people start off with the basic assumption that you did and I did before I started, sort of campaigning on these issues, which is that housing associations are going to be the best landlords, not the worst.
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, it's a big switch for me, a big adjustment. So first thing is, if there is a problem, like I was asking Louise, is anybody else affected by it, right? Which actually forces us to knock on each other's door and get some kind of community spirit. That's the first thing. So we need to also document anything that happens. So there is a list and an itinerary, in fact, of the day that I phoned, what the response was, and where we are now. Is there anything else that you would recommend, Suzanne?
Yeah, we have some resources on our website to help people make a complaint, but you can also approach your MP or your councillor. They should be able to help. They should be able to make contact.
And most of them are very, very good with this sort of thing, aren't they? This is bread and butter stuff for them.
Yeah, is dealing with this kind of casework. But certainly if there's an issue that is affecting, a wider group of tenants, then, this is the kind of thing that SHAC does, is help people actually campaign on it. We don't do individual advocacy in that sense, but we do help campaign on these systemic problems, because they are systemic. It's happening in housing association. This is not one rogue housing association. And, you know, this isn't one bad apple in the barrel. This is absolutely systemic across the sector.
Yeah, but it must be encouraged by something. That you know, when we look at Grenfell and tell me about the systems not being fit for purpose, building regulations, and that's being borne out in the inquiry, there must be something that allows those people who are in charge to feel as though they can act in this way, Suzanne.
Yeah, because, like I said, because they feel that they are unaccountable. And when you look at the systems that are supposed to be there to make them accountable, they aren't really. They're not put, you know, because these are such powerful organisations, you would need a very powerful system of accountability, and it just isn't there. And it isn't there because that's the way government has designed it.
Like government, that's quite powerful.
Yeah, like government needs to really start looking at what it's going to do to bring housing associations into, you know, some kind of accountability. And, you know, I mean, you could talk a long time about different sort of policy decisions and how they work. And, you know, that might be a subject for another programme.
No.
But, you know, they absolutely do need to be reviewed. And you know, really, we need to be looking at solutions like building more council housing, so that we don't have these giants that just consider themselves to be above any kind of, you know, sort of accountability to anyone.
Well, hold on, Suzanne. Let me stop you now. Right, you've proved yourself eminently qualified to speak on this subject, so much so that you and I will go for it again in a different way, on a different, slightly different angle. But I do have to ask you two quick questions. One, maybe most importantly, is what is your website?
Okay, it's www. and it's SHACtion, SHACTION.org. So SHAC and action is one word.
And when you lie down and you close your eyes, you've had that glass of red wine, or Prosecco in your case, what is it that you dream that Rishi Sunak will come up with tomorrow in that budget that will make people on estates, in council, co-ops, housing association properties lives better?
Gosh, that's throwing one at me. I would say to cancel rent and service charges for people who have suffered economically over the pandemic, to make sure that we get.
You're not mucking about. You don't want a little bit. You're not even saying about for the people that live on there who are on universal credit. You know, permanently keep the universal credit. You're going for gold.
Eddie, there has been research on this, and it would be a fraction of what has been paid to big business to keep big business afloat, which is absolutely fine. That's people's jobs. People depend on it. But a little bit of that, you know, money going towards helping tenants stay in their homes when they've lost their jobs because of the pandemic, not because they haven't wanted to pay. They've had good records on payment of their rent and service charges beforehand, but people have really, really struggled as a result of loss of income. And this sector, the housing association sector, has a surplus of $4 billion. They could be putting some money into helping tenants and saying, we will not evict and we will wipe out the rents and service charges that you owe because you haven't had any work over the last year. You know, we're coming out the other side of the tunnel. You know, let's just give people help and make sure they stay in their home, to help them stay stable, to help them stay in work, to help them, you know, with their health.
Yeah, we've got a mental health challenge coming, or just fix the property. That kind of works as a starter, doesn't it? Suzanne, we'll talk again. I promise you that. Suzanne is from the Social Housing Actual Campaign. Look, you know, we're talking about social housing. I'd love to hear your story. Were you in it? Are you not? What do you think? Maybe you work in a housing association. You want to push back. We do not treat people like that. I don't know. 0800 73